America, 1861. The odds of war are here. Before them lay two sides of the same coin, North and South. Many a man will fight his cause, but there can only be one. In the Western Theater plays one man, the High General Ulysses S. Grant.
Our family is American and has been for generations in all its branches, direct and collateral. In June 1821, my father, Jesse R. Grant, married Hannah Simpson. I was born on the 27th of April, 1822, at Point Pleasant, Claremont County, Ohio. My father set up for himself in business, establishing a tanner at Ravenna. In a few years, he removed from Ravenna and set up the same business at Point Pleasant. In the fall of 1823, we moved to Georgetown, the county seat of Brown, the adjoining county east. This place remained my home until at the age of 17. My life in Georgetown was uneventful. From the age of 5 or 6 until 17, I attended subscription schools of the village. My father was, from my earliest recollection, in comfortable circumstances, considering the times, his place of residence, and the community in which he lived. Mindful of his own lack of facilities for acquiring an education, his greatest desire in mature years was for the education of his children. I was not studious in habit, and probably did not make progress enough to compensate for the outlay for board and tuition. This did not exempt me from labor. In my early days, everyone labored more or less in the region where my youth was spent. While my father carried on the manufacture of leather and worked at the trade himself, he owned and tilled considerable land. I detested the trade, preferring almost any other labor. But I was fond of agriculture and of all employment in which horses were used.
Ulysses held a humble childhood. From his father's tannery work, he strengthened himself to craziness and strife, and although he hated the trade, did find other merits from the finance. At his father's junction, Grant purchased a colt from a neighbor. The young Ulysses proved to be a marvelous horseman from a young age, doing both farm labor and skates with the animals. On the subject of labor, you may note the absence of the enslaved in his mentioned words. This is because the Grant family seniors were strident abolitionists and themselves detested the complex.
In the winter of 1838 to 1839, I was attending school at Ripley, only 10 miles distant from Georgetown, but spent the Christmas holidays at home. During this vacation, my father received a letter from the Honorable Thomas Morris, then United States Senator from Ohio. When he read it, he said to me, "Ulysses, I believe you are going to receive the appointment." "What appointment?" I inquired. "To West Point. I've applied for it." "But I won't go," I said. He said I thought I would, and I thought so too, if he did. I really had no objection to going to West Point, except that I had a very exalted idea of the acquirements necessary to get through. I did not believe I possessed them, and could not bear the idea of failing. Besides the argument used by my father in favor of my going to West Point that he thought I would go, there was another very strong inducement. I had always a great desire to travel. I was already the best traveled boy in Georgetown, except for the sons of one man. I reported at West Point on the 30th or 31st of May, and about 2 weeks later passed my examination for admission without difficulty, very much to my surprise. The military life had no charms for me, and I had not the faintest idea of staying in the Army, even if I should be graduated, which I did not expect.
But Grant did go on to graduate. Within his time at West Point, he met more than 50 future generals, even serving with some of them during the Mexican War. Grant did note that he was not a model student, but he did take well to mathematics and the arts, even with his delayed exposure to them, given an absence of material childhood. The on-site library received more deliberate interest from Grant, taking quite a liking to novels and history.
As already stated, it was never my intention to remain in the Army long, but to prepare myself for a professorship in some college. Accordingly, soon after I was settled at Jefferson Barracks. 3rd Infantry had selected camping grounds on the reservation at Fort Jessup, about midway between the Red River and the Sabine. Our orders required us to go into camp in the same neighborhood and await further instructions. There is no intimation given that the removal of the 3rd and 4th Regiments of Infantry to the western border of Louisiana was occasioned in any way by the prospective annexation of Texas, but it was generally understood that such was the case. Ostensibly, we were intended to prevent filibustering into Texas, but really as a menace to Mexico, in case she appeared to contemplate war. Generally, the officers of the Army were indifferent whether the annexation was consummated or not, but not so all of them. For myself, I was bitterly opposed to the measure, and to this day regard the war, which resulted, as one of the most unjust ever waged by a stronger against a weaker nation. It was an instance of a republic following the bad example of European monarchies, in not considering justice in their desire to acquire additional territory.
The Mexican War of 1846 saw Grant's first major deployment in the military. Grant was greatly disturbed by the prospect of the war, yet showed remarkable calm and bravery in action. During a battle, the standing officer had requested an ammunition run to station troops. In motions of thought, Grant heard the call for a volunteer and took up the post. The standing officer at first informed Grant that, as a quartermaster, he need not engage himself in such affairs. But Grant insisted his charge and took to the reins. This rather famously led to Grant riding on his horse sideways into the line of fire, maintaining an eerily calm disposition and fulfilling the objective. Following the war, Grant took up far stations on the western coast. Having not seen his wife and children for long swaths, he became lonely. Grant had actually penned many letters home to his wife, lamenting at their distance and his emerging obscurities. Unfortunately, this led Grant to lean on drink. His habit became so poor that he was eventually discharged from service, and so Grant took his steps towards home. Once home, Grant took his hands to farming. Unemployed and on his mettle, Grant chopped and sold firewood in the nearby town, desiring to keep his family under his own roof, not his father-in-law's. He had set about building himself with the aid of a slave, which had been given to him by his father-in-law. The fact that his wife's family owned slaves had upset Grant's parents so much that they refused to attend his wedding. Grant worked alongside the slaves, which disturbed those around him, believing it beneath him. However, in his deepest economic strife, Grant, against the prospects of those around him who had urged to sell the man, chose to set the slave, which his father-in-law had given him, free, inciting the blessings of God upon him and returning to his family's roots. (1860). A decade after the events of the Mexican-American War, tensions of abolition and pro-slavery have boiled over. Newly elected President Lincoln lobbies for the end of slavery. Starting with South Carolina, southern states begin to secede the Union. In the spring of 1862, Confederate forces lay in the wake of morning mist. Suddenly, as if by dire storms, thunder rips through unaware Union encampments. Bald lead beckons a hastened retreat. Unaware, and in the company of other commanding officers, is Ulysses S. Grant. He is enjoying breakfast in Cherry Mansion, Savannah, Tennessee. Grant was known to occasionally eat a meal of fried apples and buckwheat cakes, but during the Civil War, preferred an even simpler meal of a vinegar-soaked cucumber with coffee. As Grant hears the alarming news of the ambush, he pauses for a moment. The next words to leave his mouth are as follows: "Gentlemen, the ball is in motion." Having raced to the scene, a desperate stance is raised at the hornet's nest, preventing further calamities. Disoriented by the successive attacks of Grant and their commander's death, the Confederates call off their attack by early evening. Come the nightly rains, Grant proposes to attack at daylight and whip them. Troops from Ohio reinforce Grant's position, and at dawn, they strike. Shocked Confederates send for the hills, retreating over yesterday's lucky gamble. The death toll of Shiloh will reach 20,000, the highest in any American battle up to that point. Through it all, Grant's quick decisions and iron will claim another victory for the Union. Now, following the Civil War, Grant would go on to become president, not immediately. First, Lincoln would be assassinated, and this actually became one of the saddest days in Grant's life, as he personally remarked in his memoir. Lincoln was a close friend of Grant, and someone he very much supported, who had supported him early in his military career. Following the who should not be mentioned president after Lincoln, for the sake of what he did, Grant would become president. And although Grant clearly had a sound moral compass, his habits of drinking were greatly used against him. And for better or for worse, his open and kind personality outside of the battlefield led those in his legislation to take advantage of him. And so Grant has seldom been talked about much in the modern era. Even in our day-to-day, you don't hear too much of Grant. And the man really lived quite a colored life. He has a very interesting relationship with the likes of Frederick Douglass, who will have his own video, by the way. Frederick Douglass coined him as being the, quote, friend of the Negro. And he was actually the person to lead Grant's funeral in New York City. So I thought to make a video discussing Grant, in particular, because it's actually his belated birthday. Yes, April 27th, as you recall from the documentary. So, you know what time it is. it's time for my take on Grant's favorite, Grant's rice pudding.